All right. Hello and welcome back, everyone. We hope to all the delegates that the submission of your challenge was successful, and we wish you luck for your presentations coming up soon. And you all enjoyed a delicious lunch, but for the moment, we have another panel coming for you.
As all of you may know, starting a business, making an important decision, or setting up a new process is not always the easiest. But what happens when we fail?
Our next panel will talk about exactly that, strategic decision-making, fallacies that lead to organizational failures. We will discover the value of failure and how it can actually be an open door to reflection, growth, and endurance.
As the moderator for this session, we have Dr. Hodari, an associate professor of corporate strategy at EHL. He was recognized EHL's Researcher of the Year second time in a row and has provided education to more than 2,000 industry professionals.
To contribute to this discussion, the following speaker will join Mr. Dr. Hodari on stage. Mr. Michael Levie, the co-founder of Cube Venture and Citizen M. He has an MBA in hospitality management and is the founding partner of Citizen M and focuses on assisting startups and scale-ups in the hospitality world.
We also have Dr. Schmitt, a professor and associate dean at EHL. Dr. Schmitt has a PhD from University of Geneva, is a member of EHL Group's executive leadership team, and has published in top-tier academic journals and media. Please welcome all of them on stage.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. Some of you, or probably most of you, were here on Monday for RISE when I had you use this EHL proprietary technology, and we're going to use it again today. And I want to start, before we talk to our guests, start with you. We'll also test the technology. I'm going to want you to hold up your red card if you have never failed in your life, and your green card if you can think of a concrete example of when you failed. All right, we have a very honest audience. Everybody has failed and everybody's acknowledged that they failed. Let's do it again. I want the green card if you can think of what you learned from that failure, something concrete that you learned from that failure, and red if it's failure, but I can't really associate what I learned from it. All right, so people are saying that they've learned from the failure. I got a couple of red cards. I was expecting more red cards from that. Michael, you also put up your green card. Tell me about an example of when you have failed, not company, right? But you personally have failed in a professional capacity.
Yeah, I think that we, first of all, try not to fail. And I think that we spend a lot of our energy and our time on making sure that we don't fail, which maybe is a little bit of loss of energy because we will fail, and it's better to use your energy in finding out when you fail and do that fast so that you can recover and learn from it. And I think that one of the failures that I had to come to understanding and agreement with myself was to see that if you have failed and you repeat at it and you have not learned, that is not only for you a big impact, but for the ones that are in your immediate surrounding, it is even more painful because they usually have to end up paying for some of the mistakes that you make. And that hurt me a lot because I believe in culture, I believe in values, I believe in building teams. And if you fail your team, that is something that was extremely difficult for me. I had to learn to understand what the impact was and how I needed to learn quicker from it. So, yeah.
Okay. Interesting, but you failed at answering my question. I want a concrete example. Give me something specific you did that you said, this did not work.
So when we set out building the company, I wanted to do food and beverage defensively. So I wanted to provide, obviously, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, but I didn't want to have kitchens, I didn't want everything. And we set out with a concept, and we tested it, we did market research, we did everything on it, and then we actually put it out on the floor, and it just failed miserably. And instead of recognizing the failure, I hung on to it. and I tried to modify it and try to improve it. And it was just obvious that it was a lost cause. So I should have abandoned it. And like I said, I put too many people too long through failure, where we just should have, gone back to the drawing table, learned from what it is that we did wrong. And it was basically the dependency we had on the outside that we miscalculated. So what are the redundancies? And we just failed at it miserably. And ultimately, I was the one that not only came up with the idea, but also had given the approvals for it to go ahead. So yeah, it was very painful.
Okay, so it failed. You failed to recognize that you should abandon it and move on.
Yes.
But eventually you did. Eventually you did accept that and modify it. Okay.
Yep.
Achim, I've known you for 10 years. You failed constantly. Give me one concrete example of a failure.
So I'll give you an example that it was maybe dates a little bit more back, and thanks for giving me the time to think about it. So when my first job was I was a consultant. And you come out of university and you feel like as a consultant very privileged, and you run into companies, you get to do your consulting work and giving advice. And there was a situation with a CEO that taught me a little bit a life lesson. So I analyzed his company, was so proud in doing a competitor analysis, trying to find out how his business runs. And then I came into his office and sit down with the CEO, and he said, so what came out of your strategic work? So what is your strategic advice for me? And I said, yeah, you should actually divest that business because, BCG metrics, this is a poor business, doesn't work. And I was pretty sure and proud of my work. So the CEO sat down and said, look, if I follow your advice, I would be bankrupt by tomorrow. And I said, what do you mean, bankrupt? This business that you have suggest me to divest is actually all the enabling business for the 5 other businesses that we have in our portfolio. So if I follow your advice, we would go out of business with every business that we have in our company. And somehow that taught me, he was very calm. He paid a lot for me as a consultant, and I gave him crappy advice. So he sat down with me, took me on this side and said, listen, in the future, you maybe want to check your assumptions. Don't come in with arrogance. I was a little bit arrogant at that time because I thought I know it all. And he sat down and gave me a very nice learning lesson and a life lesson to turn around and learn from this personal failure in my consulting work.
Okay.
I think, Demian, if I may, sometimes we think we're invincible. We think we can do everything. And I think the hardest lesson to learn and to realize is that we cannot. We all have a glass ceiling. We all have our limitations, and we need to learn to recognize those. And unless we do, we cannot move on.
But don't you think part of that is that, as you can't, go into your parents and saying, I failed this class, or I failed, I got fired, or I disappointed my boss. That's a tough thing to do. And as an employee, someone's always watching over you, right? Your promotion or your next job or your bonus is based on successful performance. So you're afraid to fail. And there's not a culture of acceptance or encouragement of failure, definitely not in schools, and right where you have to then repeat, and definitely not in companies. And what I'm trying to get across a little bit is that we need to break that. We need to be able to figure out how we can use failures.
Well, one of the things that I tried to do in our company is to set up almost a celebratory, thing about failure. So in our company culture, it became very normal to talk about failure, became very normal to admit real quickly into a failure, what went wrong, and to celebrate it. So we high five on failure and actually are having a good time about it. So people are very comfortable in discussing what went wrong so that everybody collectively can get around it to improve it. And the longer you hang on to denial that it is not wrong or it's not a failure or it is a problem, and if companies don't allow you to just come out and make it an open conversation, it is an issue.
But you're obviously you're a rebel, and your company's an exception. I don't think that's normal. Let me get a green card. If you think an organization that you've worked with or your school, or you have felt that failure is acceptable and possibly even rewarded, and red if you really still feel that failure is shunned. All right, more green than I would expect, but almost half, I'd say. All right, so that's interesting. I wonder, I don't think I've ever felt that failure in somewhere where I worked, even when I ran companies, was something we celebrated or encouraged or accepted. I think it was really always a negative thing. As in faculty, we fail all the time when we research. Almost never is a research publication accepted right away. It's rejected, and with encouragement to rewrite, right? And we learn to have thick skin and resilience. Is that a fair assessment, you think?
Yes, I think the faculty, being a faculty and being confronted with failure is part of our game. But I think if you think about what the organizations create out of failure, it's similar to success. If you have a success, others want to buy into the success and benefit from the success also to go up. If you have a failure in a company, often this is used as a stepping stone to say, yeah, you couldn't do it. Let me show you how it's been done. And I think the psychological safety to say to someone like, look, I'm fine and comfortable with failure and I can rebound of this. This needs to be learned and also be set into individuals. And I think we can go a long way in learning, for once, something from faculty, that this is a good environment to accept failure.
I want to get to it a moment. How do we learn from this so we have life lessons and practical advice? But before that, give you an example of a corporate failure and how they learned from it and turned around, because that's your area of specialty.
So usually one of the reasons is for corporate failure is probably not addressing and acknowledging that you fail. So if you think about what is the failure process in corporations, you say, okay, the first thing is often you don't realize that something is wrong. So this is due to, because we look always in the past and try to project the past in the future, and then if you don't have the information, you don't realize. And then when something is not working, you say, yeah, maybe this is due to external things, or maybe there's another reason behind. We sit it out and we wait it out. And then if you then realize there's a problem, often you treat the symptoms of the problem, not the source of the problem. Right. So you try to make a quick fix and you say, okay, now we have declining sales, maybe we should improve marketing, or maybe we should work harder and more efficient on certain things. And then you do actually maybe keep fighting the symptoms, but you don't go to the source of the problem and acknowledge and make a good assessment why you are in the midst of failing. And this is sometimes also linked to that CEOs, when they realize there's a problem in their company, that they sometimes say, okay, I don't want to actually acknowledge that we have a deeper problem. I don't want to scare these stockholders and the shareholders that we have in the stock market. Maybe I'll try to cover it up. And then in the end of the day, when you do this in a dwindling process, you actually end up in failure. And companies that are managing this, a good example, the most known example, and I think in the last 25, 30 years, the biggest successful example of a turnaround is Apple, for those who don't know it, but Apple was in the mid-90s on the brink of bankruptcy. They brought back the CEO, the founder, Steve Jobs, and they turned it around. But every time you see a success for failure is they are willing to analyze the problem and change fundamentally the business model itself. And that is quite a bold move to assess whether you're currently doing is still valid on the market or not. All the failures that you have out in the market are failures because their old way of doing things don't work anymore, and they are scared of adapting it because you would abandon maybe all your clients or you're risking losing all your clients and do something new. And that is very hard. Marvel is a good example maybe for all of you. They were in the comic business in the 90s, and all of a sudden they said, like, look, let's start and going much more into the media business and turn it around. And they were huge successfully while being at the brink of bankruptcy in the 90s. It's a good example as well for Marvel.
All right, so if we try to take that and extend it to our audience's careers, what advice do we give them? Michael, you love to do this. Taking this idea that we have to accept failure, we have to also accept that not everyone is going to accept that we fail. How do they manage that risk-taking with their career, jobs, organizations, with the need to succeed, advance, etc.?
Before I answer that, I want to come back to one very important element about failure. Failure doesn't happen at one particular point. Failure happens a little bit at a time till it leads up to something larger. And what we need to do is be analytical, and we need to distinguish and really see what is happening. And what happens, we get so passionate about what we're doing, is that we're in the game and on top of the game, and we do not take enough time to take a time out or to zoom out a little bit. And what I've learned from the mistakes is that if I do not have time to reflect, if I don't have time to sit back and have distance, I do not notice all the small little failures that lead up to the larger failure or the recognition of that failure. On the career path, getting out of school, how exciting when you're finally done with your studies to get started in the industry. So what we aim for is a position, and that position should have recognition in all the studies and all the experience that we've gained so far, and it is sort of a first measure. The funny thing is that you start to concentrate on the job title, maybe the pay, and what we fail to do is to look at us as human beings, is what type of environment do I really excel in? What do I need around me in order to do well? What do I really like to do? And if you do what you like every day, then it is very easy. It comes natural. If you really have to put yourself to it, then it becomes a task. It's much tougher. So my advice to you is when you start in your career, take a moment of reflection and take time for that. Like I just mentioned, you need to take distance a little bit for you to recognize your own feelings, your own beliefs, your own values. And in that, recognize how you need an environment or a company to support you and what type of environment you would excel in. And then look at what excites you from a job point of view and also where you do it. Because don't do it anywhere. Just be very specific. Do I want to do it in Europe? Do I want to do it in the US? Do I want to do it in the Middle East, in the Far East? Where is it that you want to settle down for a couple of years? Because what happens, immediately out of the gate, you're going to give it your all. So for the next 2-3 years, you're going to work like hell because you really want to make sure that you succeed. So if you make the wrong choice, you're going to put a lot of effort into it. And if you realize at one point that it was not the right move and you don't like it, you need to switch and start all over again. And you cannot do it 3, 4, 5 times. You can do it only 1, maximum 2 times. So before you get too enthusiastic for a job, a title, or money, think more, what is the type of company that I would like to work for? What type of job really excites me and do I want to do? And where do I want to do it? And when you have put those 3 together, then start looking at what opportunities are out there and you match it much easier.
Yeah, I just want to build on one part, right? When you say the organization, is it fair for them to say, you're in your interview and sometimes they come in and say, well, do you have any questions for us? Would it be fair to say, can you give me an example of something of failure in your organization, how this was dealt with, or if you're meeting employees, asking them how that's treated, because that's going to give you a sense of the culture and your chance to learn there, your chance to be a risk taker.
So my advice is even stronger. Don't wait for the question to come. So when you go into an interview, be yourself 100%. So if you have a question right off the bat, ask the question. Be assertive. Be comfortable enough with yourself to really show who you are, because that is the best way to match. Because the quicker you find a perfect match, that lock-in, the better opportunity you get. So don't be shy to give a little bit more of yourself, and do not try to look for what it is that they want to hear. They want to know about you. And if you need more information about the company, ask them. And if they cannot answer you on values or the culture or give you examples or cannot satisfy you in your questioning, then abandon it yourself. Don't wait for an offer and say it's good or a bad offer. Just be tough with yourself and make sure that you end up at the right company for you.
I want to definitely leave time for your guys' questions. If you've got them, get ready. I'm going to get the mics going in a minute. I want to move the discussion a little bit. So we've been talking about failure, learning, and I'm happy to take questions on that. We talk about continuous learning. So they're learning in school. School's easy to learn because you have classes. There are, the course objectives every time. This is what you're supposed to learn by the end of the semester. There's an exam or a paper. You're getting feedback. Did I learn or did I at least, fool people into thinking I learned it, right, or whatever. But it's easy to kind of document that. Then you go to work, and you're not getting normally as constant feedback, right? Some organizations are better than this. It's not that every 4 weeks you have a paper or a test and you're getting feedback and you know how you're doing. It can go 6 months or a year sometimes before you really have this feedback. So, and I'll start with Achim. How do they gauge and keep track of their learning and make sure they're learning and not wait for someone else to say, wow, good job, you've really learned how to do this. They're responsible for making sure that they're learning. It's not the school or the employer who's going to be monitoring and measuring their performance constantly. So I don't know how to answer that. Hopefully you do.
I'll try. So the environment, I think, if you look at the next 20 years, when you look at those statistics, that 45% of the jobs that exist today will be replaced in the future by new jobs. What we currently teach in the university or bachelor level, or sometimes we need to adapt to a more and more technological digital environment. So I think there's a natural move in the future that will force every one of you, including ourselves as educators, to go and be open and mindful about new competences and skills that we need to develop. So I think it's a natural progression that you as an individual have to take on if you live in those VUCA, or I think the latest name is now BINA worlds, where you are sitting and say, like, look, if I want to strive in the next 20, 30 years, where's always, how do I progress? How do I learn? How do I don't get complacent? And I think this is also, it is not an age question. It's also a question that I think we ourselves ask ourselves every day to say, like, look, how can we teach in the future generations about the newest things? Where does the knowledge come from? And probably that knowledge doesn't come from a supervisor. It comes from a network of either peers or network of university educators or private companies where you said, like, look, I want to get into this, I want to stay curious. And the only advice I can give you all is, like, if you want to check not to fall behind, stay curious. And every time you have run into a roadblock, try to overcome it, try to learn and see how you can develop further in the future. But it's more and more up to you also to do this, because you're not in an environment anymore that pushes you towards it.
I think it's got to be more concrete. I have a daughter who's more or less their age, a little younger, and she went to work, and we talked about this, which she loves when I give her advice, right? And I said, you need to ask them what they want you to learn. What do they expect that you're going to learn? What do you need to learn to do well, right? 3 to 5 things. And then what do you want to learn? In a year, when you've done this, what would you like to have been able to say, I've learned these things? And then keep track of that and say, am I learning this? Am I getting enough experience in this? Because if not, life goes on and you're busy, and then a year goes by and you realize I didn't learn all these things, and I've been doing the same thing for 8 months and I didn't learn these things. And that's what I mean by they have to be their own professor. They have to be their own, course leader and say, here are my objectives. Some from the company and some from me. If not, it's just, you lose sight of your constant evolution and learning. I think
I think that learning is an eagerness also, and a recognition that you want to learn something. So if you're open to learning about something, then anybody around you can provide that. And it's an attitude. What is a reality that evolution goes so much faster? Not only has the world become small, but the speed that technology is providing and digital is providing, the speed of learning is shifting also. So if you're not eager, then you're going to lose out. And I think that is something that you need to recognize, that if that does not become part of your habit, that you're open for change and does need to learn new things, you're going to fall behind. And that is an isolation that you don't get out anymore.
But it's also, and it's going to take me to my last question, and then we'll get to your questions, is if you don't do this, it's harder to decide when or if you should go and do more education. 2 things. First is, oh, look, I've learned everything I wanted to. It's time for me to make a change now. Either need a new job or a new organization. If not, you end up staying and you're happy, you've got friends, you're complacent, and you don't realize that you're not learning anything new. And if you're not constantly learning new things, you're going to become less valuable later, I think. And then the question is, okay, I've learned everything here. Here are the things I'm not able to learn or where I'm recognizing I'm struggling. This is why I'm going to go and do more formal education, a master's or a doctorate or whatever. So tell me, because I think you and I don't know about Achim, but I did my master's 6 years after my bachelor's degree. And it was really the right move for me. When did you do your master's degree?
Yeah, I also had like maybe 3-4 years in between.
Okay, and was that valuable? Like, why? Because one of the questions I get all the time is, should I go and do my master's right away?
I think that between your bachelor's and master's, the focus is quite different. And the more experience you have and you know how to deal with that, the better it is, in my opinion. Don't wait too long either, because you disconnect. Although the continuous learning is something that we need to do. So if you are eager to grow at any stage in life, then pick up, where you left off and continue growing. But I believe it's healthy to have a little bit of experience, because reality is very important in that second stage.
Yeah. When did you do? How did you?
I did consecutive. I did a master's, then I worked, and then I came back from work to do a PhD. But for me, it was a question of whether or not I have access to a job that I wanted at that time, and that was at that time my decision base. I think I was not as mature as you both, that you said, like, look, after a little experience, I go back. I was pretty sure that if I go into the job market, which was non-hospitality at that time, so if I go into that job market, I needed that to have actually a quick career advancement, and that was at that time my decision base why I went into a master's degree. But overall, I think this is a little bit the discussion of whether or not, what do you need it for? Why are you interested in it? Is it something that you would like to do, give time and maybe reflect? I was super lucky, to be quite honest, and I was feeling in a hamster wheel when I was a consultant, and this exit to do my PhD was a mind opener to get out of an industry, take a step back, even when you mentioned it in organizations, but even for myself to reassess and say, hey, do I want to become always in the private sector in a hamster wheel, having 60, 70, 80-hour days with long weekends, not seeing a lot of friends? And I went back to university and said, like, hey, this is a mind opener. I love what I'm doing. I went into this crisis turnaround topic, and I said, thank God I did this. It was a life career shift for me, and then developed a new field. So I think every decision is good for you if you know why you do it. But think about where you get your knowledge in and where you get your degree from. And if I may just add this, Demian, I always believe there's a big discussion about whether or not private companies should give you a degree or university should give you a degree. I'm a big fan, not because I'm working at a university. I'm always promoting not corporate degrees, but rather educational degrees, because A, it gives you more pivoting options in the future, and B, you get a general sense of knowledge instead of a focused sense for a corporate academy, a focused sense of knowledge. So I would always encourage you to be more broader and get an official recognized degree, even if this is maybe some others tell you, like, I don't think this is valuable in the future. I believe still that if I have a plumber in my bathroom, this guy didn't do it on YouTube. He has done a formal education for being a plumber. So in that regard, this is just something that I wanted to share with you. Please do and keep on learning.
All right, two questions. First one, green card, you think you will do a master's or further education at some point? Red, you're done with school. Oh, okay. Half, maybe 60% green, so 40% are done. Okay. Now, only those who had the green card. Green, if you want to go right into a master's when you finish your undergraduate. Red, if you're going to take some time off. All right, so more towards taking the time off, which is, I think, what Michael and I are recommending here. All right, I got more to ask them, but we'd really like to get questions from you if you have them about anything we've talked about, or anything else. No. I think we need the microphone. So
Now it works.
Hello, can you hear me now? If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll come to you.
So I'm trying, and then you can hear people saying like, success is the mother of failure. But some people also say like, do what you love what you do. But the other people also say that do what you're good at rather than what you love, because it may not guarantee success. So do you think that there's a boundary to the extent of like how much risk, how many times that you should take the risk of failure?
All right, it's a great question, right? So we want to tell them, be risky, take a chance, etc. But like you said, you've only got a few opportunities, right? Time goes on, etc. So how do we balance this? Do what you're good at, do what you love. Obviously, the dream is that they're both, right? That you do what you love and you're good at it. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I think it has to do with your own energy. And you need to decide that, right? Because you need to get up every morning and do something that you're passionate about. So if it is not what you like, then you're going to put more effort into it. And like Achim said, sometimes you need to take a job that you need to first earn your right a little bit. And it's long hours, it's tough. It is a little bit disappointing because you're finished and you think you immediately sit at the wheel and can steer. No, you need to lead up to that. You still need to gain experience in organizations before you start to really manage and become responsible or be part of vision and direction of the organization. So it takes a little bit of a challenge at first. So I would say if you don't like what it is that you're doing, it's going to be so tough. So you need to put too much energy to it, and I don't believe in it. So stay close to yourself, and I would say focus on what you're good at and what you like to do, and that is much healthier in my opinion.
But what if what you like to do, you're not necessarily good at it? And it's kind of like when you see these famous actors or athletes and they say, stick to your dreams, etc. Well, the only ones that tell you to stick to your dreams are the ones that were successful. The 99% of actors who never get a job aren't telling you stick to your dreams because they're miserable. So
no, but there's a balance, right? So, and you yourself are the only one that can gauge that. So if you're good at something but you're not necessarily liking it, that keeps on coming back because what you like, you might not be good at. So if you want to get into that and fail and recognize your failure quick, you still end up doing what you're good at, right? So I think there's a little bit of a balance that you need to be true to yourself and say, listen, am I willing to take that risk, yes or no? I've seen too many people that follow what they like and then fail so hard at it that it knocks the wind out of their lungs, and that's horrible because you need that energy. And so be close to yourself, and it is not a generic answer. Be close to yourself and know whether you're going to succeed in that or where you need to focus on what you're good at. And, in those first 2-3 years out of from graduation, it's very important that you really figure out what it is that you want to do. You have no dependence, you can take risk, you can trip and fall a couple of times without, it causing serious damage. When you're further in your career, you have responsibilities, maybe also for family and other, then it is more difficult to take those risks. So early on, take the risk. So by all means, follow your dream and do what you like, but be realistic as well. If that's not going to take you anywhere, then shift quickly.
I'm going to go to the next question. The only thing I would add is I think if you're good at something, you then will find a way to turn this into something that you like. It may not be, you may be great at math and you're in accounting. You don't really want to be in accounting, but then, hey, I'm really good at this. There's another way for me to use this skill. And you discover that, I think, with experience. So that would be what I would say. I think we had a couple more hands. Where's the mic?
Good afternoon.
Can you just stand up?
Yes.
Yeah. The lights are bright. Yeah.
Thank you for the great discussion. I have a question. Regarding, you said also on a personal level, when you fail, you have to analyze it. And I believe if you look at it from a business perspective, it's a lot easier to analyze because you're not you're a group of people, perhaps analyzing things. But if you're on a personal level and you're failing, there's a lot of emotions involved. And you said that you have gone through many failures to get to this stage in your life. So what did you do to handle the emotional side of failure?
Very good question.
Can you take that one?
I think it's a very good question. And the emotional side is actually also in an organization that you need to, if you want to learn in an organization from failure, you need this psychological safety. And also when you are in an interview and you feel like this guy puts you on the hot seat and he squeezes you and he just wants you, he's not welcoming you. I think this psychological safety is a big thing for organizations. So personally, how to overcome the emotions of failure is that you need to have somewhere a support structure. I would say, either you take the energy out of passion and purpose, and you say like, look, I love what I do, and this allows me to move on and to get my positive energy in it. Or you have a support structure and where you can talk about it, you analyze it, you have a trustful environment, and you get your energy out there. And you say like, look, am I really, you reflect, you need to put yourself a lot into perspectives. But when you do this with people that know you and support you, they tell you then and how you can, that helps you to overcome these emotions and make those emotions that are negative in the beginning, turn them around in something positive and then move on. So I would say support structure is a big thing, and the passion for something that you do where you can get this energy out, and then celebrate also maybe those successes that you have and remind yourself, because our mind's eye is always sometimes biased a little bit by the fear of failure and the negative experience. So shift your mind's eye like a tennis player. When you serve a volley or you missed a match ball, they don't think about that they missed it. They need to move on and have a positive attitude. And this is a little bit also similar when you have personal failures. You can stick into it and stick to the past, or you try to overcome and take something positive out of it.
Yeah.
So there's one other thing than only having the support system around you, I believe, is a value that we cherish in the company. It's called feedback as a gift. And one of my failures is I was not direct enough. I was not assertive enough in order to give people feedback. And I've changed that quite a bit. Now, you can do that nice and appropriate, but feedback usually, if done factual and packaged right, helps people. They might not like it. They might be shocked at the beginning. But if you give appropriate feedback, that is the important basis to be able to have facts that you can then make decisions on to change things if you want. If you do not get that feedback, it's terrible. And it can be as simple as you have brushed your teeth in the morning and you have toothpaste sitting here. If by 6 o'clock you are standing in front of the mirror and all of a sudden go, like, oh my God, I got toothpaste from early 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, and nobody gave you the feedback that there was toothpaste on you. It's a very basic one, right? It's embarrassing that nobody said that to you, but people don't.
You're good to go.
I'm good to go? Thanks. Oh, Jesus. But so feedback is a gift. And sometimes the people that taught me that were very direct, and I was at first shocked. I go like, Jesus, that's not nice to say. It's very nice to give good feedback.
Thanks.
As long as it is with your heart, appropriate, and you think it through first.
Good. That was great. See, that was feedback. Let's get one or two more questions. We'll get short questions and short answers, guys.
Yes, hello. I have a question about failure in educational institutions. I believe that it's not supported or they do not encourage failure. It's the opposite. So do you think there will ever be a time, or how can we get to that level where we support failure? Because I feel like us students' fear of failure is disabling us from learning as much as we can.
I think it's great, and I think for 20 years you've been in school, and failure is the worst word, right? You're terrified of it. I think it's a great question. The only thing I've seen that's worked is you get that first assignment and you do poorly and you do better in the next one. We eliminate the grade off the first one, right? There are ways to encourage improvement, or the percentage. There's a lot of rules and regulations in schools that make that kind of hard. And if you say, well, this assignment's not graded, so take a risk. Sorry, but people don't put the effort into it, we think. And so it's a hard one. I don't know if you have any, I don't think there's a great solution here.
Well, I think that failure is something that puts the fear in you, right? And it's not nice. But you need to learn how to recognize failure, not be afraid to have failure, but you need to, like Demian says, learn immediately from it and do better. So I think that everybody can be forgiving about a one-time failure or a second, but at least there needs to be improvement. If there's no upward curve, then failure is going to confront you. So I like that confrontation, unfortunately, because you need to deal with it. And if you do not improve, so don't be afraid to fail. But if you do not immediately learn from it, you have a serious problem. And so that's why I like there to be a little anxiety. I don't mind so much.
And I think the fact that you recognize that this is an issue in school, will help you to maybe break free of that later, right? And not be afraid of failure like we are in school. I know I saw a couple more hands. Is there another question? Where's the mic?
Right.
All right, can we get the microphone already to the next person so we can go quicker?
Hi, and what do you recommend to do if the failure is not totally your fault? I mean, you have talents, people that support you recognize that, people that taught you, even if they were very rigid and demanding, recognize that you have talent, but enterprises do not want to recognize it and they refuse your curriculum. What do you recommend to do at this moment of your life?
Anyone?
Go ahead, Achim.
So I think if you are in an environment that doesn't allow you to recognize your individual efforts and grow, this is always a bad environment. So if people don't recognize that you're that they blame you for failures of others and they look at a scapegoat, I think in general I would be not a person that strives in this context. And my recommendation was for you to first explain what are the reasons why you think this is unfair evaluation for yourself. And if this is then not recognized, I would probably personally not long stay in this institution.
It's a good one. Let's take one more question.
So what can be put in place in an educational system or like a university in order to embrace failure during your studies, for example?
I think it goes back to the previous question. I think it's a tough environment to reward failure, right? Because you're going to repeat the class.
Well, I think, to be real honest, we all gone through school, right? And we've all failed at one point. And I don't think that there's any teacher or any professor that I've ever, had in class or worked with that does not understand if there's a learning curve. They're all forgiving and they all help you. So it's your attitude. So I think that learning curve, if that is there, then it's forgiving. And to be real honest, if you look at failure as it was not my fault, then get out of the game. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not your immediate or direct fault, but you're responsible or part of it. Own up to it. So also in education, if you fail, own up to it. Then don't say, I should be able to fail. No, you should not. You should have your grades, learn from it, and then do better. So there's a lot that you need to dig deep down in yourself. And the one thing that I'm allergic to is people that say, yeah, but it was not my fault. Were you not part of it? Yeah, I was part of it. No, just own up to it. And that is, I think, the attitude that you need to do is if you pour your energy into it, anybody and everybody will recognize what it is that you're doing and your effort that you're putting into it.
Look, that's all the time we have. I guess we had a roundtable on Monday, and there was a student who was asking, saying, how come we never talk about failure? Is she here in the room? No? Really?
She failed. She went home.
But, yeah. And I thought it was great because this had been my plan to do this. I think what I want people to take away from this is, and I'm always afraid to have these kind of conversations that it sounds very, recommendation, keep striving, keep learning, and we always say these things. I think you have to get concrete, right? I think you have to say, here's what I want to learn, here's what I need to learn, am I keeping track of this? All right, I'm struggling here. What am I good at? Where can I go with this? And if you don't be very tangible and very concrete about this, 10 years are going to go by. You're going to not have been continuously learning. You're not going to be doing what you want to be doing. And no one's going to do this for you, right? You're in charge of your life and your career. And there's no one there kind of keeping track of that. And you probably will fail even more than you did in school because you're going to be able to take more risks. And having that positive attitude and being able to learn from that and to put it in perspective and not get too emotional and be able, I think that's what's going to be key. Guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you, everybody, for the great
Good luck, guys.
Good luck. Thank you.
I'm taking my water.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you once again to Dr. Hodari and our wonderful speakers. That was a great discussion, and I'm sure we all learned a little bit more about failure